14. I'm actually surprised this many showed up, to be honest. I anticipated, and especially, you know about the storm downstate, right? There's I don't know, well, for those of you who are traveling downstate, hopefully you know that there's a storm brewing. And apparently it shifted what day it's supposed to get worse. So it's supposed to shift into tomorrow instead of, it was supposed to happen, I guess, last night into today, and now it's like delayed. So if you're planning on driving downstate, you might want to check that carefully just to make sure, be careful. So hopefully you'll have a good Thanksgiving and get a chance to at least have a little bit of relaxation. I know it's a crazy time of the semester. So when we get back from break, we have, think about that last exam. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So that is the last week of the semester. Okay, so the last exam is the last week of the semester. And I'm still debating where to put it. I really don't want to put it on Friday because you do your presentations on Thursday in lab. So that's kind of a bad mix. So I'm leaning toward actually having it that Monday of that final week. And then using Wednesday and Friday as open sessions during lecture for study for the final, asking questions about the final. So exam 4, because it has to be such a quick turnaround, it's not going to be any essay on that. It's going to be just the ones I can automatically have graded. So true, false, matching, multiple choice, those types of things. But I won't be doing essay on exam 4. Okay. And then for those of you, if you average all your tests together and it averages to 82, you can decide whether or not you want to take the final exam during final exam week. Okay. The final exam will be cumulative, but I will give you a study guide for that one, asking, you know, kind of outlining very specific topics that I want you to zoom in on. Okay. So I will be providing a study guide for the final exam in terms of zoom in on these topics. Questions on any of that?
If you would like to say something about
yes, that's a good question. The final counts. So it's, you have to think about it, like, should I go for it or am I happy with, and don't forget your lab grades, factor those into your overall grade, right? So there's a lot of points coming from lab. So I usually, from past experience, I usually see students opt not to take the final. And so if you can, you know, add together your lab grades so far and kind of play around with it a little bit, if you want to chat again after you've done that, given it some thought. Yeah. Yeah, I guess, right. Other questions about, so I kind of saw some nods when I said, let's have it Monday of the final week. Okay. No, we have a whole week. Correct. December 5th. Yeah, let's make it clear. December 5th. That way you get that done and then you can breathe to do your final work on your presentation and lab. Okay. I'm going to try to make those if I can, but I do teach during the morning lab. And then I might have a doctor's appointment in the afternoon lab. So I don't know yet. I'm trying to figure that out, but I would like to at least show up for some of them. It's always fun to see what's been cooking. Any questions? And then the final exam is Wednesday, December 14th at noon. So do you know the answer to this question being shown? It's relevant. Cranberries. So I thought it was appropriate to, oh, come on now. Very unusual plant, big business. For some reason, my oldest son loves cranberry juice. Who knew? But it's very good for you as long as you, the issue is though, they shove so much sugar into so much of the cranberry juice on the market. So I try to buy some that are not either, you know, like pure cranberry juice, no added sugar, or, you know, light in how they add the sugar. But it does have a lot of good secondary metabolite profiles. So if you enjoy cranberry with your Thanksgiving dinner, go for it. It's a good one. Interesting. I've never harvested cranberries. I think it'd be fun though to go harvest those. Be an experience. So, which one? Left or right? Or do you have both? The whole berries? My family, I grew up with the jelly. And that's what the trick. I deliberately put this picture in because whoever could do that, without breaking it, it was like, gold star. So it became my mission. I was the youngest in the family, so I was usually tasked to do that. That became my mission. I'm pretty good at it now. So, but I think most people do gel or whole. I'm thinking. So
That's good. I used to think cranberries came in a low.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's usually what I do. I get it whole, and then I show everyone I did it, and then I flop it over and cut it. So, but yeah, it's. I think the whole. I gotta try whole berries one of these years, just to. Yes, please send it to me. Yeah, I would love it because I think the whole berries is a better. Ooh, oh yeah, yeah, send that. That sounds delicious. He switched to that. Okay, so it's good to hear. I'm thinking I'll think the same thing, but that's what I grew up with. I'm not used to. Yeah, but Thanksgiving, right? This is at least you can tell it's not cranberry. It's like, oh, you can see it. So okay. Uh, well, I hope you have a wonderful, restful Thanksgiving. Can take a little bit of time for yourself. So, but we need to get into the next topic. So what I thought I'd do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about stress physiology, and then I also wanted to switch to a different slide set on um, um, how to grow fresh air, essentially. I wanted to give you a little bit of information on that. And I've been trying to figure out a way to sneak it in, so I thought today is as good a day as any. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about this idea and then switch into the other topic. So we're looking at abiotic stress now. So we've been covering biotic stress. If they're getting attacked by some kind of pathogen, broadly speaking, what do they do? And so looking at their response to the pathogen, their signal transduction pathways. Now it's this idea of, as we're all aware, plants can't get up and walk away, so they have to deal with any kind of abiotic stress coming at them through the whole year. And certainly around here, I'm going to cover chilling and freezing first because it's often students vote for that one because it's usually around this time of year when it's getting cold that we get into this material. So if you think about abiotic stress and just that, the impact on crop production is tremendous. And so 22% of the genetic potential yield in the sense that there's so much abiotic stress, not just chilling and freezing, all kinds of abiotic stress that is impacting them. And so when you look at it in a plant physiology context, it's an external factor that exerts a disadvantageous influence. So it's a pretty broad definition. And then they often throw this phrase out like a stress tolerance. What's the stress tolerance for that plant? And so they're just saying, how is the plant, what's its fitness to cope with whatever stress? So we're going to be looking at abiotic, non-living. So we're looking at environmental stress of some sort. And I know some of you are doing is it drought? Doesn't one project do drought? I think. And then salt stress. Or maybe it's just the salt.
I think we just did nobody picked that.
Yeah, okay. So I know that was an option, but I couldn't remember. It's been a long week. It's hard for me to keep stuff straight. So here we're looking at just, I think you could all come up with a list like this pretty quickly if you just sit and think about it. There's a lot of things that a plant has to deal with, especially in a temperate region like this. Lots of different shifting of the seasons. And so depending on, well, we're getting into chilling and freezing first. So here you're looking at water deficit and salinity. So again, just some general introduction to plant stress. And looking at, obviously, if you have drought, you're going to be messing with the water potential of the soil, which then can compromise what's happening in the plant, of course, because they won't get ready access to water. So any living organism needs water. We deny that, and they don't have a whole lot of options. They're not like microbes where they can form spores and go dormant. There's only so much they can do before they reach what they call the permanent wilting point, and they're done. Even if you add water after they've reached their so-called permanent wilting point, and it's different depending on the species, but once they reach that, even if you watered it, they wouldn't bounce back. And so that's kind of like the end. Salinity, so some of you are looking at saline impacts, and obviously that's going to mess with the water potential big time. And then also the ion toxicity going on, it's going to impact the cell that way, the plant cell. And then, also you can see the secondary effects too, just looking at kind of this domino impact of these different stresses, what's going to start happening in the plant, as well as in the soil for a lot of this. And so here you're looking at flooding and soil compaction. Anytime you flood the soil, you're removing the air gaps in the soil. And in the pore spaces, there should be air in there. Otherwise, the plant is going to have a hard time. The roots are going to have a hard time breathing, so to speak. Roots have to carry out respiration just like we do. They need oxygen, and you start flooding the soil and all kinds of issues. So directly the plant is having problems getting access to oxygen, and then the microbes in the soil. Often, when you flood the soil and it stays flooded, the microbes in very quick order can start to cause toxic buildup of waste products that negatively impact the plant. So there's all kinds of this domino thing going on in the micro world in the soil. High temperature. You don't worry too much about that in this part of the world, but it is certainly a big deal in tropical, subtropical. So chilling and freezing, we're going to get into that first. So again, we're going to talk about how that impacts the plant cell membrane, the water potential. You actually get dehydration impacts from that. And then, of course, toxins in the soil, where it could be, they've looked at heavy metal toxins as well as just toxic buildup from activities, human activities through industrial processes is also a big deal. Too much light is often kind of overlooked, but that is something that you need to think about and make sure. Some people think they should just blast their plants in their house with high powered lights, and it's like, well, yes and no. You need to make sure that it's not too much light intensity. You will see damage from that. Okay, some terms that are used in the plant physiology realm. Acclimated, the more like Gardner term. Gardeners will actually talk more and say hardened, that the plant was hardened off, they say. If you talk to a plant physiologist, they would say acclimated. And so here we're looking at this idea where you get the plant to increase its tolerance to the stress. And so in the spring, it's here. They usually say, in April, if you're germinating your seeds in your home and you start to get your seedlings, your tomato seedlings, let's say, but it's too cold to leave them out full time, what they often prescribe is that you put the plant out for an hour or two, then bring it in. And then the next day, put it out a little bit longer and bring it in. And you keep doing that over several days to acclimate it to the cooler temps. It's not your lovely apartment temperature, out in the spring here, it's going to be cooler. So you're acclimating them or hardening them off so that they can more quickly adapt to that cooler temp in the spring in the garden outside. The word adaptation there's a precise meaning for that in the plant physiology realm. If someone says that, they're looking at the genetic, what's going on in terms of what genes do they have and the genetically determined level of resistance. And so and it's over many generations. So they're looking to see, like, is this mother plant producing seeds that have the genes necessary for the offspring to deal with toxins in the soil? So they're kind of looking at that idea when they use the word adaptation. It's usually thinking about passing that on into subsequent generations through seed production. Okay, So very specific definitions in the physiology world. So here they're looking at crop insurance payments. You know, what is the insurance payments paying for under what disaster? And so cause of the crop loss, you can see drought wins. So worldwide, well, this is just the United States actually. Drought is the #1 reason why insurance companies will need to pay out their insurance premiums or their payments. Even hail makes the list. Hail damage. Here, some data collected over 2001 to 2015. Again, drought, pie chart, look at it, drought wins in terms of what's been the most serious problems. I think the precipitation includes, or no, we did separate out hail. Hail is at the 10-zone high. Precipitation, flooding, storm. I was actually quite surprised that diseases and insects are only at 1% data. I thought it would be more. So, but 2001 to 2015, during that stretch, there's still a lot of pesticide applications. So I'm thinking that's keeping things in check. But that's 1% of, I'm sure they looked at thousands and thousands of acres of crops to generate this data. So they match up pretty well, the drought especially, with insurance payments. Even, so you have two different eras going on here. And drought is still an issue. Didn't go away. So plants living out in a field, in the forest, they have to deal with this type of thing. Around here, it's certainly chilling and freezing is an issue. So when they do these studies and do careful controlled studies and look at exposing plants to cold conditions, so more of the chilling idea, what they do see is that there's not active growth going on, but at least there's not active death going on either. And so as soon as ice formation starts to happen in the plant tissue, that's when you really get worried, because that can cause cell lysis and really severe damage. And then of course, once you start getting tissue damage, the opportunity for opportunistic pathogens to gain entry and start to cause problems can go up. Even in the winter, there are microbes hanging out on and in the plant that can cause problems. So tropical areas, if you think about trying to get them to adapt to chilling conditions, that's a little bit more of an effort. And so they're most worried about tropical crops and plants that are in the tropical zone, how well they can deal with chilling and freezing. So here you're looking at seeds that were harvested from plants growing in higher altitudes where they are more routinely exposed to cooler temps. The higher you up you go in altitude. And so here you're looking at chilling resistance. And so the higher up on the y-axis, that means they're more resistant to chilling. And so these were seeds that were harvested from plants adapted to living in higher altitudes in the mountain region. And you can see it's a definite shift. You see two clear clumping of data here where the black ones are from like normal altitudes. And so this research is really, a lot of it is aimed at tropical and subtropical plants because of the worry that they won't deal with chilling very well. And so there's a lot of effort going on here. When you look at chilling a plant, and so these are, a lot of this data is coming from lab-based studies where they do careful controlled chilling. What they do see is they can measure that the photosynthetic rate slows down. And kind of everything slows down. There's going to be slowing down of the sugar transport as well. So that kind of goes hand in hand with slowing of photosynthesis. That means there's not going to be as much sugar production. It kind of makes sense that phloem translocation would also slow down. But then even just their day-to-day respiration that they're doing, just like we're doing right now. We're respiring, we're using our oxygen to make ATP, and hopefully we had a good breakfast and running glycolysis and the electron transport chain. They have to do that too. And so all of that slows down under chilling. Protein synthesis slows down. You start to see some pretty dramatic slowing down in transcription and translation. And then the cell membrane is of great concern, because if you start to see cell membranes being compromised, of course, that leads to actual cell damage, tissue damage, death of that area of the plant, and then it also can allow for pathogens to gain entry and start causing problems. So they've put in a lot of effort at looking at how does chilling affect membrane. I just wanted to mention a couple of key ideas with that. And so when you think about cell membranes, whether it's our membrane or the plant, it's this, going back to, basic biology class, you have the phospholipid bilayer. And so you have kind of mirror images here with that space in between. So it's that bilayer where you have the glycerol, and then you have fatty acid tails coming off of that. And then, of course, the phosphate groups with the glycerol. So what they know is that plants can shift what fatty acids are being incorporated to make their cell membranes. So they can shift which types of fatty acids are going into the cell membrane. And so as you start to chill the plant, you'll see different ratios and composition of what are the fatty acids showing up. So let's think about this for a second. Just from your normal everyday use of, if you do any kind of cooking in your home at all or watched your parents cook, when you think about it, when you have butter in your house or olive oil, which one do you remember can stay liquid at room temp? Yeah, usually butter hardens up unless you have a room that's 80 degrees, I suppose, but olive oil. And so that's because of the fatty acids that are in the olive oil compared to butter. So when you think about the fatty acids, here is just looking at the idea of saturated and unsaturated. And so when you think about unsaturated, there's double bonds. So mono, unsaturated, is one double bond. Poly is two or more. And you can see how that puts a physical like bend or kink in the fatty acid. And that's important because now these fatty acid tails won't line up right next to each other. And so if they line up nice and orderly, where they're just kind of straight fatty acid, and that happens when it's saturated, then if you put that under cold conditions, it's more likely that those fatty acids will start to gel and start to partially solidify up. Well, a cell membrane's not supposed to be solid. It's really bad because you need a liquidy membrane of sorts so that you can have good transport in and out, everything's functioning. So you do see a mixture, and so it depends. If you are a plant that's adapted to really cold conditions, you'll probably end up with polyunsaturated fatty acids in your membrane, so that your fatty acids are kind of bending away from each other, they're kinking away from each other. And if you apply cold to that, they're less likely to actually solidify and get a membrane that solidifies. And so they've done a lot of looking at this. Microbes are famous for doing this too. Microbes are able to do this and adapt very well to the cold by messing with their ratios of saturated to unsaturated. So I just put this here to get you thinking about the different types of fatty acids that you see in the membrane. Omega-3 and omega-6 is important for our diet. We need a ratio of that. And if you follow the so-called standard American diet, which if you put that down to an abbreviation, standard American diet, that abbreviates down to SAD, which I think is so appropriate because it is sad, because what they're talking about is lots of highly processed foods. You get way more omega-6 in your diet than omega-3s, and it's skewed. That's one issue that they're seeing that's bad for our health. So you need the right ratio of those two. and we're getting the wrong kind in our SAD diet. But anyways, here you're looking at fatty acid composition from chilling resistant and chilling sensitive. And so what you're looking at here is on the bottom row is the ratio of unsaturated. So if that number is high, that means they have a lot of unsaturated. And that, as you can see, it's the chilling, the plants that are exposed to chilling and they become resistant to that cooler temperature, they actually have more unsaturated fatty acids. So the data is supporting the idea that if their plants adapted to cold, they should have more unsaturated fatty acids. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. The next thing I'm going to get into is freezing and ice crystals. I think I'll stop with that. And I wanted to switch over to the other slide set. It's posted in EDUCAT as well. And this is more for your information. I'm not gonna test you on it per se, but I think it's important to think about for your everyday life. So this is actually the scan of a book, How to Grow Fresh Air. I actually recommend this. Last time I checked on Amazon, it was under $10. So it might be a good, if your mom, for example, likes plants and you're thinking for a Christmas present, this would be a nice, give her that little plant from the plant sale. Oh, plant sale. We're gonna have a plant sale when you come back from break. We're gonna have a plant sale. And so buy her a little plant, buy her the book, you're good. You got your Christmas present. So and so this is a very handy book because they have all kinds of different house plants in there and they tell you like, is it adapted to full sun, part shade, what pests are normally attacking it, how to keep it happy, and then how good is it for you to clean up your air quality. And so this is all based on research that NASA kicked off. And it is this idea that when you are going to be traveling to other planets, we need to have good quality air. And they're recognizing that if we bring plants with us, that would go a long way to helping our air quality in artificial environment. And so this translates into the real world too, not just going to different planets, but in your home and in your offices, you are exposed to all kinds of different volatile organic carbons that aren't necessarily so good for you, and plants can help you with the cleaning up your air, essentially. Some quotes from the book that they put in there, just the highest mission of plants is not merely to please our eyes with color, our mouths with delicious fruits. Not only do they do this and more, but they are ever silently but surely eating up what is impure and injurious to ourselves in the atmosphere. So 19th century, they have a way of talking back then that's always fun to read or hear someone say it. Okay, keep going. Move forward. All right, doesn't want to move forward. What's going on? Horticulture again, now in the guise of space biology, has reestablished the essential connection between plants and people. It must increase in importance in our homes and schools, communities, to improve the beauty and quality. Yes, yes. Okay, so what am I talking about here? So when you think about all the materials you're surrounded by in your apartment or your work, there are lots of things to consider that might be giving off volatiles that are not the best for us to be breathing in, especially in high doses. High doses tend to happen with new things like new paint on the wall, new carpet, new upholstery. You know, the new car smell that you get when you buy a new car, that a lot of people like that smell, which is great. You know, I don't have an issue with that. It's the fact that if you can smell it, you're breathing it in. You're breathing in something that's producing that volatile smell. So is it good for you? I don't know. You know, you need to do some research on that. So this is just things you find everywhere in a home or office, and they do give off gas. They actually call it off-gassing. And so the new carpet smell, you know, sometimes that's super potent. And that's coming from the fibers as well as any of the material, the adhesive material that they're using. So this is from the book, is showing some of the chemical emissions given off by some of these things, like even Kleenex. You know, they talk about facial tissue. So even Kleenex has formaldehyde, apparently, at least some of them do. You know, so you can see wherever the red square is, that they're saying, yes, that particular item has that emission. So there's a lot of stuff that we make and manufacture that can off gas. And as just a point of note, formaldehyde, by law, we're not allowed to have anything in our buildings on campus that contain formaldehyde. So when we moved into these buildings that were built, the new OSHA laws, like, nope. And so in biology, we pickle specimens in formaldehyde. That was the thing back in the day. So we had to switch everything out of formaldehyde and into ethanol and get rid of the formaldehyde because they know it's a carcinogen. So I think back to my days of taking comparative anatomy where all the, like what did we dissect? A cat, a shark, that was all formaldehyde. I remember, my nose barely, practically touching the carcass and breathing in the formaldehyde. It would sting my eyes so bad I'd have to go outside and stand there in the hall for a while so I could stop crying because it was making my eyes tear, kind of like cutting an onion. Then I go back in and do it all over again. Now I think back to that. It's like, okay, great. But they didn't really know back then that formaldehyde, maybe not such a good thing. So this is just a blow up of that screen showing lots of different things. All right, so we have these issues. So the broad term is volatile organic carbons, VOCs. Another way that sometimes I talk about, well, bioeffluents is the idea specifically from living things. And so usually when they say that term, they're referring to humans. And we give off volatiles too. That's certainly we exhale CO2, but there's other stuff that we're exhaling as well. In fact, when they've studied some sampling from different humans, it's kind of surprising what we end up giving off, depending on our diet and what we're essentially taking in through food and drink, can cause different CO2 or volatile organic carbons. Alcohol, shocker. So, but certainly. So now with new OSHA laws, when new buildings are built, like this one was built in what, 2000-ish. The other one was around that time too. If you've noticed, there's no way to open windows to get in fresh air. So when I first came to campus here, the building that was here before on this spot, we could crank open our windows. And then OSHA laws, they make it so you can't open windows. And I think it has to do with fire code. If I'm not mistaken, they don't want people opening a window during a fire because that'll just feed oxygen to the fire and make it worse. So I think that's where that's coming from. Does anyone know? I think it's fire codes. And so I was dismayed to find that out because I knew this was going to happen with a brand new building. Everything's new and off gassing. Ugh. So I went to what is that? They sell a bunch of plants out on the highway. Anyways, it's a plant store. In the summer, they have a bunch of plants for your garden. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it. Anyways, I went and bought huge Boston fern plants, and I had a dozen of them in my tiny office. My office is small, and I had them everywhere. And I'll explain why. There's a reason for it. People would walk in and they go, "Oh, it smells so good in here." And I didn't have like any essential oils or anything like that going. It was just the plants making that air smell so good. So what's going on here? Thinking about the plant. So as it's carrying out transpiration, moving water through its plant body from the roots through to the stomata, what you're doing is that's creating a air currents around the plant that will bring air in the environment down to the roots. And so those are called convection currents. Just simply the transpiration process will kind of stir up the air in that way. And the air will get routinely kind of brought down to the soil level. And so what's good about that is that if you have a real plant in real soil, the microbes in the soil will start to break down any contaminants. They're very good at it. And so it's kind of a team effort. It's not just the plant doing this. And so we're thinking about as the contaminated air is coming into the soil, microbes are attacking it, breaking it down. Microbes are doing it not to make you happy. They're doing it because they can use these chemicals for their source of ATP production, for their carbon needs. And so they're doing it for their own physiology, but in the meantime, they break it down for us, and hopefully to less toxic chemicals. Then the plant itself is taking in CO2, which is a bioeffluent. You don't want too much CO2 in your home. And they can take in some organic chemicals as well. And that can happen through the leaf. It can happen through the root zone as well. And then again, the microbes are doing their part for sure in the rhizosphere. So plants can degrade some of the volatile organic carbons. It's known that they can do that. So they're capable of bringing it in either through their roots or the stomata and breaking it down to less harmful substances. And then once it's in the plant, don't forget about the endophytes. They've been looking at that as well. And they know that there are some endophytes that are really good at breaking down toxins, that, things that are toxic for us and for the plant. So it's kind of this team effort, what's going on, the microbes in the soil, the plant's ability, and then what's the endophytes inside the plant. So it's this group effort in that regard. You can't just say it's one or the other. And then don't forget that as the plant is carrying out transpiration and its physiology, they're emitting things out of their stomata. So they can certainly take things in, but they can also give off certain things. So oxygen, obviously, we know that they produce all that lovely oxygen that let us evolve on this planet. But they're also giving off water vapor, which is good because you want some humidity in your home, especially now. I don't know about you, but bloody noses, it's kind of common around this time of year. My son just said, I just had a bloody nose in the shower, just gushing because the humidity levels have dropped. And you want to keep your mucous membranes in your nose as intact as possible, especially with COVID and flu season. Keeping that mucous membrane intact and healthy, not cracked and bleeding, you don't want that. So having plants in your home that can contribute to water vapor in your home and humidity is really good. They can give off other volatile chemicals too. And what they studied is that some of these volatile chemicals that the plant is giving off actually knock down populations of microbes floating around in the air. And so they've seen that certain plants, and they've done careful controlled studies, they'll have plants in a room and they'll create like two identical rooms and they'll have plants in one and not in the other. And then they take air samples over time and they look at what's going on, and the presence of the plants drops the number of microbes and spores that are in the air compared to just an empty room. They didn't really anticipate that level of impact. It was a really nice set of data there. So NASA, of course, they are interested in this idea because if you go to a planet where there's not oxygen to breathe, you need to have controlled or closed systems. And of course, you have to have the right atmosphere for humans and other organisms to survive. So they've been looking at this for quite some time. And here on Earth, they built a biohome structure to kind of mimic, like, what would it be like for people to live in a totally sealed environment. And so they ran some studies here, and they did show that presence of plants in this biome definitely reduced the VOCs as well as adding oxygen into the air. And so they started getting into this more carefully and wanted to do more careful controlled studies, and there's a lot of different scientists getting into it. So they all kind of came to the idea that let's pick one contaminant and use that kind of as, so we'll all look at that across the nation and around the world. And so they picked formaldehyde. They said, let's go with that one and see how the plants deal with the presence of formaldehyde. Can they break it down? And so they kind of keyed in on that one, even though there's lots of other VOCs, but it was just easier for all the different research teams to do this. And so you can find formaldehyde in a lot of different things. That's another reason they picked it, because it's pretty ubiquitous. And so it's everywhere. So we had to get rid of it in this building, but it's still in the building per se, in a way, sense that it can be in these items. So here, it's from the book, you're looking at different plants with a common name given, and then they're saying, how well does it remove formaldehyde? So the bigger the red bar, the better. Okay, so it's showing micrograms per hour of formaldehyde decrease. And so Boston Fern wins. So now you know why I picked Boston Fern, because I was quite worried about the new building, all the off-gassing. But you can see there's a lot of other plants that are pretty darn good. Some of the slower growers, succulents that don't grow so fast, don't have really fast transpiration rates. That kind of goes hand in hand. Like Boston fern has good transpiration rates. Dwarf date palm, I've had that. Gerbera daisy, yes. So it tends to go hand in hand that if it has a fast transpiration rate, it's probably pretty good at breaking down, because as it's got that real fast transpiration rate, it's creating all those convection currents around the plant. So it's bringing all the volatile organic carbons into the soil and microbes act on it. So peace lily is a nice house plant. I have a lot of those as well. And it's a hog for water. It gets wilted so quickly if I'm not paying attention to it. So I know it has a super fast transpiration rate. So that book also has, besides formaldehyde, there's been progress in xylene and toluene and ammonia by houseplants. They've been zooming in on the houseplant idea now, just, people in their normal everyday lives, what would be good. And so they give you a bunch of different normal houseplants that you can find in different stores. And so you can pick ones that seem to have some good abilities. So these are, a lot of these you can see in just normal, even Walmart carries quite a bit of this. So you don't have to go to a fancy forest shop to find these species. They're pretty common. Here's bioeffluent idea. They say like in a crowded classroom, you would be giving off these types of VOCs, and they pick the peace lily plant, and they're showing the kind of the little daisy image is the bioeffluent removal per plant. And so they're saying if you have plants, you're going to get a lot of breakdown of these bioeffluents. It doesn't take that many plants. So this is just peace lily. So they give information. If you like target in on a plant in that book, you can find out like how good is it at breaking down these different things. And then it also gives information about care and feeding of the plant. So it's a nice, I don't have any stake in this book. So I'm not trying to promote it. I'm not benefiting from if you were to buy this or not. It doesn't, I have no impact on it, but I'm just saying it's good information just for your everyday life. And hopefully beyond this class, you'll be thinking about these ideas, because I don't see air contamination going away anytime soon. It's just going to get worse in my opinion, because we're not really doing enough. And unfortunately, some VOCs, it's not like they understand you have to stop at the door. Diffusion is diffusion. It's just going to go. So, but anyways, microbe suppression. These were really interesting studies. They did not predict this dramatic of an impact. 50 to 60% fewer airborne molds and bacteria floating around in the air if you have plants in that room. And so they talk about, in the literature, they'll phrase it as personal breathing zones. And so their definition in a lot of the papers, they say 6 to 8 cubic feet is like your personal breathing zone. And so they actually are trying to figure out like how many plants do you need in your personal breathing zone to feel confident that you're getting some nice quality air going on. But they certainly add humidity, they remove your bioeffluents and the VOCs coming from all the stuff around you. They suppress the microbes and molds and spores. And so having plants with, not the fake ones, like actual soil and in the plants in your space is a good thing. I've had some people say, but what about the soil? I mean, wouldn't stuff like kick up from the soil and then that's bad for you to breathe in? And it's like, not really, not unless you like take a handful and wing it up in the air. You're not really going to have that issue. And they've actually found that if you interact with soil yourself, if you're a gardener, it actually is really good for your immune system. And they're even linking it to reduction in depression, because there's certain microbes in the soil that can influence your microbiome and shift you to be less depressed. I'm not kidding you. Like, they're doing really careful studies where they're looking at this. And so certain microbes that you get exposed to in the soil actually can reduce anxiety and depression. That's pretty cool. So here you're looking at a study where they looked at a plant-filled room versus a bedroom that had no plants. And you can see a drop in humidity as well without any plants. So Does anyone know what humidity levels you should have in your home for your health? Do I have that in here? I might have it in here. I think I put it in here somewhere. Maybe, maybe not. Oh, here. So this is taken from an HVAC publication, but they say 45 to 55. I actually shoot for 55 at least. I try not to go below that. And they're saying, you know, the threat decreases in that zone. So it's interesting how like there's an optimum, kind of a bell-shaped idea here, where if you go above it too much, then you can actually get issues with, well, I know that firsthand. I sometimes overshoot with my humidifiers and get like, before I realize it, it's like 65, 70% humidity. And then I start seeing mold showing up on my windowsill. So just, be careful. You have to target it. But that's the zone that's good for your nasal mucous membrane to keep it nice and moist and intact. So this is trying to show kind of all kinds of things going on that we just talked about, where you have the transpiration rates going on, infection current that gets the air into the soil, microbes start acting on it, plants start acting on it, and then you have these directed at VOCs are getting off some important things besides oxygen that can help clean up the air around you. So that book, in the slide set, I have several different plants, and I just, as examples, like, so each page of the book will give you the common name of scientific thing, and then a little bit about it, and then you give all the data of how to care for it, what's an issue in terms of pests, and then on the bottom they always give you what happened, removal of the VOCs. So, and then the very back of the book gets into, are they shade tolerant? So you can pick ones that you have a dark apartment or a dark home like I do. I try to go for shade tolerant, so they have that information as well. What's this one? Oh, that's just. So, where is the other? Oh, I guess that was it. So the peace lily, if you've not seen a peace lily before, very interesting flower as well when it decides to flower. Come on. Hello. No, no. My laptop just does not like to. There we go. So that's the one that's a hog for water. He has really fast transpiration rate, but they're pretty easy to keep if you just remember to water them. So, all right, we'll stop there. I just wanted to give you a little bit of plant physiology that you can use in your real life and hopefully for years and years to come. Hope you have a good day. Thank you. Yeah, be careful on the roads. It's going to be bad downstate, unfortunately.